Good morning. Good morning. One of the probably most central verses in our tradition is the Bodhisattva vow, which is 4 vows, and the first line is, "Beings are numberless, I vow to save them." And this verse is found in many of the early sutras, including the Lotus Sutra, translated in various different ways. And last week I brought up near the end of the talk one of the translations by Hui Nang, and I thought it would be good to really look more closely just at this very first line. "Beings are numberless, I vow to save them." And in the weekly koan class that we have, which now that daylight savings has changed in Australia, it's going to be 7 a.m. on Saturdays, and in America it'll still be 2 p.m. on Fridays. Anybody can join at any time. What we do in that class is often we're talking about a very short koan, like the one that we've just worked on goes, a monk asked Yun Men, "What are the words that go beyond Buddhas and patriarchs?" And Yun Men says, "Cake." And we spent 3 weeks, 3 weeks on that little tiny dialogue, and it's a remarkable process. So I thought today we would take "Beings are numberless, I vow to save them," and kind of look at the key words: beings, numberless, I, and save. Look at those 4 words from different perspectives, and see whether it illuminates this vow for us. So the more literal translation or interpretation, more literal interpretation would be beings. If we say beings are numberless, I vow to save them, and take it very literally, it has both its benefits and its drawbacks. If we take beings to be anything that we can see or hear or know about, humans, animals, insects, plants. We could include that to extend to landscapes like rivers, mountains, clouds, the air. If we think about beings that way very literally, then we do notice that we can't conceive of what all those beings are. It's inconceivable. So many that are so small we can't see them or know about them even. They keep arising and disappearing moment by moment. But thinking of it literally can really help us be open and curious about all the phenomena that we experience through our sense gates. It can help us just be very aware of, oh my gosh, there is so much out there. There's still so much out there calling for us. And the same really with the word numberless. We can't count them all. There are so many beings that need saving, or so many beings that suffer, or just so many beings who wouldn't mind being noticed, just simply being noticed. Just like to be noticed. The earth is calling out for us just to simply notice her right now. Please pay attention to me. So the beings are numberless, and I vow to save them. So I think the benefit of thinking of I as the very personal self, this particular person, this particular body, I vow to save them, can, I think, help us to be responsible and take responsibility for our experience. And actually, just recently, as some of you know, I had the experience of going for a run and coming across a baby lamb that seemed to have lost its mother. There was no sheep anywhere in the vicinity. And as I sort of knelt down, when I saw the lamb at the edge of this dirt road, it came up to me and started sucking on my leg. And in that moment, there was this sense that I am the only one in this moment that can do anything about this lamb. This lamb was almost certainly going to die that night. It was very windy. It was dusk at the time, just before dusk when I found it, or it found me. So there was a real sense of like, here is this moment, and I personally am the one in this remote area. There was no farmhouses around, no mother sheeps around, no ewes anywhere. It was just me and this baby lamb sucking on my leg. So it was a good experience of I am the one in this moment. But of course, very quickly I picked up the lamb. A car actually luckily went past, so it was able to drive me back to where my car was parked some miles away. It very quickly became a collective process. The I kind of faded very fast. Alex and Mavanwi helped me. All the different websites that tell you how to look after lambs helped me. Going to the supermarket and getting goat's milk to feed it, the people who made the goat's milk helped that baby lamb, and so on. But for that brief time, the responsibility rested with me. And then save, if we take the word save very literally, it can be helpful, as in that example. Am I going to save this lamb or not? And it seemed like a good idea. I'd taken a vow to do so, to just pretend there wasn't a problem. Didn't seem like a very bodhisattva thing for me to do. I mean, I could have. The thought did occur to me. Oh my God, I'm going to pick up this lamb. I'm miles away from my car. I don't know much about lambs. But the feeling of save did seem, the literal interpretation of like save it. It's a good idea to save it. It was quite strong. So it's useful to take those 4 words very literally. Beings, they really exist, that kind of literal interpretation. They're numberless, it's pretty obvious. And I, personally, vow to care for their well-being, to save them. Of course, the slight downfall with that view is it's an impossible task. So we could very easily get overwhelmed by the thought that I personally have to save all the beings of the world. Very quickly we could be overwhelmed because it simply can't be done. And it can also create a sense of sort of ego identification, almost like I am the saviour that has to save the beings. It could, taking it too literally all of the time, would create a sense of yourself as being somehow overly important. But there are some benefits to taking it literally. And maybe a sort of softer, gentler way of taking these vows would be to see it more from the perspective of our interconnectedness, our interdependence. If we see it that way, the whole vow has a slightly softer feeling to it, less self-identification and more of a sense of communality, communal quality. We can think of all the beings as part of a web of life. Still thinking of beings as actual distinct beings, but interdependent with each other, part of a big web. if we think of everything as interconnected and part of a big web, then to care for one part of that web is sort of caring for the whole web. You know, a little bit like if you have a cut on your hand, caring for the cut on your hand does benefit the whole body. It benefits the whole body. You don't really have to be looking after the other fingers on your hand or your toes. Just benefiting that cut finger benefits the whole body. So that seeing beings and the numberlessness, seeing them in that framework as part of an unknowable web, makes it a little easier to think about saving them. To help one is to help the many, that kind of feeling. And also when we think of ourselves as part of this big interconnected web, like Indra's net, we have the image of Indra's net with the jewel at each point of knot of the net. There's a jewel that reflects all the other jewels. If we think of ourselves as part of that as well, then we don't have so much of a burden somehow that I personally have to do something. I and my community, whether we're thinking in terms of our Sangha, or the human community, or our family, seeing ourselves as just one facet of a larger community, and doing our part, just doing our bit. It's got a modest, a sort of a lovely modest quality to it. We're just doing our little bit. Like helping that one little lamb. As I was reading on various different animal care websites, and I kind of knew this anyway, but it was interesting to read, and a little sad, of course, that lots of little lambs get separated from their mothers on farms. And sometimes mothers have to make choices, difficult choices, whether to care for 3 lambs or 2 lambs or 1 lamb. And sometimes they have to let go of one of their lambs, which I'm sure isn't easy for them. So there's lots of little lambs that probably are out there right now in that area that are cold, and some are dying out there. But to have saved at least that little one, you know, when you think of it more from the sense of the interconnectedness of life, we did that little bit there. There's animal sanctuaries doing their bit over there, and another one over there. And just like there's people in Ukraine right now sort of rescuing animals from zoos and getting them out of the dangers of war. So we're all doing our little bit, we're all doing what we can. It's a nice way to not have too much ego investment in what we're doing. We just do our part from this sense of being part of an interconnected web. And maybe even the sense of saving from this sort of interconnected place can soften a lot more. I was reminded of living in the United States, where I lived in Santa Cruz. There were a lot of people who were chronically homeless, had been homeless for years, in very, very destitute situations. And I always carried enough $1 bills around, so I could give them to people. And there's just a sense of that one little piece combined with whatever else other people were doing to help each person. I mean, there were many, many people where I lived there doing great work to try and ease the burden of homelessness there. It's well over 2,000 people just in the town I lived were homeless. And different people would help set up temporary camps and try and help those camps be safer spaces by having people there at night and setting up toilet and washing facilities, and there were mobile showers and all sorts of things. And each person was doing their little part. So it was a kind of saving, a communal, collective saving of beings. So I think that perspective, seeing these four words, how they're, the interconnectedness, how each of those words has got a much bigger pull than just the individual, than seeing it just as an individual thing. I think that can be very helpful. And then another perspective is seeing it from, you could say, a more absolute perspective, or the perspective of not knowing. From this perspective, beings, we don't really know what beings are. All we know is what comes in through our sense gates. Our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and consciousness. We don't know what beings are. If we can keep that kind of not knowing mind, then we can proceed, but with humility. We proceed, but we proceed with humility because we don't know. We don't know what beings are. We don't know what this particular being is. We don't know who we are. We proceed with humility. We can't know the vastness or the number of beings that need saving. So we just have to proceed with humility. We don't know who we are. So we just proceed with humility. And we don't know what saving is. And so we just proceed with humility. I think it's very important that we keep this not knowing mind as much as possible in everything that we do. It helps us not to become self-righteous. It can actually help us not to get too depressed or overwhelmed. We can just, instead of being sure of how bad everything is, we can just soften into don't know mind. But we'll proceed, nevertheless, with humility. So I'd like to read a little from the Platform Sutra that I mentioned last week, which is sort of what was the impetus for this whole talk. This is a different translation of this first line, and I think it certainly captured my imagination and a number of other people's. It goes, "We vow to deliver an infinite number of sentient beings of our mind." This is another way of thinking of beings of our mind. And I'll just read the comment here by Hui Neng. "Learned audience, all of us have now declared that we vow to deliver an infinite number of sentient beings. But what does that mean? It does not mean that I, Hui Neng, am going to deliver them. And who are these sentient beings within our mind? They are delusive mind, the deceitful mind, the evil mind, and such like minds. All of these are sentient beings. Each of them has to deliver themselves by means of their own essence of mind. Then the deliverance is genuine. Now, what does it mean to deliver oneself by one's own essence of mind? It means the deliverance of the ignorant, the delusive, the vexatious beings within our mind by means of right views. With the aid of right views and prajna wisdom, the barriers raised by these ignorant and delusive beings may be broken down, so that each of them is in a position to deliver themselves by their own efforts. Let the fallacious be delivered by rightness, the deluded by enlightenment, the ignorant by wisdom, and the benevolent by benevolence. Such is genuine deliverance. So this idea of we vow to deliver an infinite number of sentient beings of our mind was something I had not come across before. And it really strengthened for me the teaching that in many ways all we need to do is pay attention to our mind. That attention to our mind will then be attention to our actions. That actions flow from mind. So in a way we don't need to worry about what we're actually doing. That is in a sense is secondary. The starting point is mind. If I pay attention to my mind in Zazen and in everyday life, noticing what my thoughts are, letting the community teach me about my mind. All of us have got blind spots, and other people can see them sometimes, and they can carefully point them out to us, and we can be grateful and receptive for that pointing out. Or sometimes it's not pointed out to us, sometimes we just notice someone respond in a way differently to how we would respond, and then we learn from that. We think, oh, I would never have thought to do that. Why would I never have thought to do that? And then we suddenly realize, oh, it never occurred to me to care about that thing. And thinking of saving the sentient beings of our mind, we can also think of mind as not just our personal mind, but of sort of collective mind. And I was thinking how there's all these different, say, social justice organisations, each doing what they're doing to benefit different beings, and they have their different emphases, and collectively they're all influencing each other. It's like we're all together in all of our unique ways, trying to uplift and care for the beings of the world. And in doing that, we alter the collective mind. And really, I think what we're wanting to do is to have sort of collective literal minds of beings become open to what you could say is true mind. The indestructible, as we spoke about a few weeks ago. That which can't be destroyed. That which is unborn. That which does not die. That is unfabricated and unmade, unbound. To wake everybody up to that mind. And there was another thing I wanted to read too, just to encourage us to not exclude anyone or any type of being from whom we're willing to save or wishing to save. Because as much as we like to think that we are compassionate to all beings, most of us seem to have little spots where our compassion doesn't quite go. I've noticed that in myself and in others. And we have to work on it. So this is maybe just an encouragement. Again, this is Hui Nang. Thus, within the essence of mind, all things are intrinsically pure. Like the azure of the sky and the radiance of the sun and the moon, which when obscured by passing clouds may appear as if their brightness has been dimmed. But as soon as the clouds are blown away, brightness reappears and all objects are fully illuminated. Learned audience, our evil habits may be likened unto the clouds, while sagacity and wisdom are the sun and the moon respectively. This is a description of no matter how terrible someone may appear, or sometimes people even put sort of terrible onto animals and insects, no matter how terrible they may appear, it's either the clouds of our own mind or the clouds of their mind that are obscuring the pure blue sky, the pure bright sky of their perfect being. So good for us to remember that every being is pure and bright, and it's just the clouds obscuring it. Whether it's their clouds obscuring it or our clouds, or a combination of both. And the last thing I'd like to say about this line, beings are numberless, I vow to save them, is that everything is occurring here and now, and the saving can only occur here and now, and that's where all the fertility is. That's where the vitality and the energy is. So in a way, we don't need to think too far into the future about what should I do in the future. If we just give our full attention to now, our awareness to the present, beings will arrive in front of us wanting to be saved. They're just going to do it. They'll just arrive like that little lamb. It just arrived and sucked on my leg, came out. We don't have to go anywhere to look for it. If we just give our attention to now, things will arrive and call us, and then we just respond with humility, and that's all we have to do.